Good morning. What a joy it is to be with you this morning. I pray for those who were last night in the path of tornadoes or hurricanes. I pray that all are safe and that all have gone through these struggles with the weather with the least amount of damage as possible. I had said yesterday that I wanted to do a continuation of the power of words. Most of us, well, I grew up with the little rhyme that says, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm you." And that is probably one of the biggest falsehoods, one of the biggest lies I've ever heard, because words are harmful. Words may not bruise your skin, your external skin, the way a stick or a stone may be. It may not necessarily open up a flesh wound, but I'm here to tell you that words can harm you emotionally. And whereas a flesh wound will heal, in a lot of instances, there's no indication that that wound had ever occurred. Emotional wounding from words can last for days, for decades, for a lifetime. Some of you grew up in households where you were constantly fed negative images about yourself. You were told you were like your no good fill in the blank daddy or your no good mama. You were told that you were too black or you were too skinny or you were too dumb. You were called stupid. You were called heifer. You were called all kinds of names. And as a result, those name callings, those negative images began to permeate within you, and you began at some point to believe those messages. You began to believe that you were less than. You began to believe that you really didn't matter. You began to believe this negative prophecy that someone had put on your life. But I'm here to tell you that that does not have to be your current existence. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. You are you are good enough just without even trying. Everything about you is unique and it's blessed because it's you. How do we get rid of these negative messages in our head, particularly if you've heard them for such a long time? You're so fat, you're incompetent, you are so clumsy, you can't learn. How do we get rid of those messages? Well, I'm here to suggest that we get rid of those messages by countering those negative messages. Well, there's two ways to do it. One is to counter it with a positive thought, with a positive message. If your message to yourself is, "I can't do this, I'm too dumb to learn," then you may want to say to yourself, well, it may take me a little longer to learn, but let me think of things that I have learned thus far. I am still learning on a daily basis. The other way, I don't want to confuse my messages. Countering with positive messages. If one says, if you tell yourself, "I'm just fat and I'm always going to be fat and there's nothing I can do about it," then you may learn to say, "You know what? I am comfortable with every ounce of my being. I accept and love every ounce of my flesh, every jiggle, every wiggle." And once you begin to embrace and accept who you are, then you may begin to be less hard on yourself and then begin to make healthier choices. Then begin to, even if you can't make healthier choices in the beginning, just allowing yourself not to stress out is the first step of acceptance. Countering negative messages with positive messages. If someone says, um, um, you're too you're too smart for your own good. Now, I grew up with that message. I am a pretty smart person. I was in school, I was in classes for what they call in elementary school the intelligently gifted children. And I just read all the time. It was my place of solace, my place of refuge. But I don't know that my intellect was ever celebrated. Whenever it was talked about, it was almost talked about in a demeaning way. "Oh, she's so smart. She always got her head in a book." But what I knew even back then was whether it was a good or a bad thing, it was a place where I felt safe. Reading was a place where I felt where I could escape from my day-to-day challenges and be in other worlds, other stories that gave me a sense of peace and a sense of hope. So I guess my point is this: if your negative message to yourself is, I'm never going to be good enough, then you may want to counter that with, in this moment today, I am good enough for this moment. I am bringing my full self here. I may not be good enough for someone else, but I am good enough for me. Now, I'm not even just good enough, I am fabulous. I am full of life. I am full of hope. And I just accept myself unconditionally. Yes, there is power in words, particularly the messages that we give ourselves. We are now at a stage where we can begin to feed ourselves new messages. When you were a baby, you were fed baby food or chewed up food, or you were fed things that may not necessarily had a lot of seasoning or a lot of taste. But as you grew older, you began to feed yourself things that nourished you, things that you liked, things that made you smile. You no longer had to eat what was being given to you. You could now make choices. And I want to suggest that's the same thing to do with giving yourself, feeding yourself positive reinforcements. You're no longer a victim to someone else telling you how awful you are. You can begin to celebrate you. So our challenge or our task today, or our invitation, is what negative thought can you now counter with a positive thought? So I'm looking for the negative thought and how you're now countering it with a positive thought. And on that note, I encourage you to have a wonderful day, a wonderful affirming day on purpose. Love you all. Bye-bye.